There's this one girl in my grade and she didn't sleep for 2 weeks.
Wow. Today I'm joined by soon-to-be architecture master's student Natalie Perri from Philly, Pennsylvania. We're going to discuss everything you need to know before studying architecture, as well as becoming an architect in the United States of America. We're going to go through absolutely everything from what subjects you should study in your senior year of high school to how to actually apply for architecture school and what you need, what you actually be learning in architecture school, as well as further down the path, how to get registered as a practicing architect in the US. Coming up after this intro. A massive thank you to Natalie for taking the time out of her day to have a chat with me. This was such an enjoyable and educational conversation. Natalie also has her own YouTube channel, which I highly recommend you go check out for more videos about studying architecture in the States. And without further ado, let's get into it. Good day, Natalie. Welcome to the show. How you doing? How you feeling?
Good, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. Hoping everything's well over there. This is the Successful Archie Students Podcast, episode 65. And do you want to start off by saying or sharing a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you're from?
So my name's Natalie Perri. I'm from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in the States. And I recently graduated from The Ohio State University with my Bachelors of Science in Architecture. And I'll be attending grad school in the fall.
Very cool, very cool. For this episode, I guess, because you're from the US, and I don't really get to talk to many people from the US about architecture, so this will be a good opportunity, I guess, to compare what it's like studying in Australia compared to the US. So while we're on it as well, I guess, I've been hearing it's a bit chaotic over there at the moment. Do you want to kind of share what's going on and how that's kind of affecting you with university and trying to take the next step then with your degree?
Yeah, I mean, it's a mess over here. The US could have probably handled the whole pandemic a little bit better. I'll be attending University of Pennsylvania in the fall. I'm a commuter student, but this heavily impacts any college student in the United States, not just architecture students. They're thinking of doing virtual studios and stuff like that. And I'm sure you are aware, after studying architecture for a couple of years now, that doing virtual studio almost doesn't seem beneficial to anyone, but we'll see what happens in the fall. Yeah.
And you said you were like a commuter. Does that just mean you're traveling to get to university and you're not staying on campus?
Yeah, no. My parents are from Philadelphia, so I'm just trying to save money. And also, given the whole pandemic, it's probably just smarter for me to commute. If we are doing hybrid model courses, meaning that we'll do like half in-person classes and half online classes, but really nobody has any idea what's going to happen.
Yeah, it's a bit what's going on right now. Like, no one really knows.
Yeah.
I want to start off by talking about what it's like as an architecture student in the US, and then I want to go into a bit more about the actual registration process of becoming an architect after being a student. We'll start from the very start, I guess. What's the application process like in the US to become an architecture student or to get into university?
If you are an incoming high school student and you're applying to your college, I would recommend taking any physics class, math class, art class, especially if it has a 3D modeling component to it, just so you get a feel for 3D modeling. If you're at a university but you decide to change majors to architecture, they might make you take a freshman foundation class. So you might have to tack on some additional years of college. Yeah, that would be my recommendation if you're in high school and you kind of want to explore the field of architecture. But another thing a lot of universities have done, if they have big architecture programs, is that you can take architecture camps. For about 2 weeks, you would live on a university's campus and they'll just introduce you very briefly to the world of architecture. And I think that's a really good way to explore the field before you actually commit to the major.
That's something I've never heard of before. That's really cool.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's nice.
So what, you just spend 1 or 2 weeks, did you say, on campus? And then what kind of stuff would you do on that camp then?
I mean, every camp is different. Not all of them are 2 weeks. They could be longer, they could be shorter. I'm sure they would introduce you to a little bit of everything, architectural history. You would probably model make. I would think that would be like the biggest introduction, is how you make a physical model. There's like the social component where you can meet other aspiring architects in camp. And I think it's a really nice thing that they do here.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah.
You mentioned art, was it physics, maths, and 3D programs and stuff as well, then to kind of give you a bit of a head start?
Yeah, that would definitely set you up for success in college. So just when you're scheduling your senior year of classes in high school, I would look out for classes that offer something similar.
Yeah. No, that's good, because the reason I bring that up again is because a lot of that's probably one of my biggest questions I get is kind of what should I study in high school or my final years of high school to give me that kickstart in college or uni. But yeah, that's good to hear. Do you want to kind of explain the general structure of the degree, as in like how many years it is, what kind of classes you have?
Sure. So I have a bachelor's of science, meaning that I was required to take more science and math classes instead of a bachelor's of arts in the States. Honestly, the thing that I would look out for, though, is making sure that your program for your architecture degree is accredited by our board here, the NAAB. Otherwise, if you're putting in all the work for your college degree, it's going to be worthless just because you aren't taking the proper classes that the NAAB requires for you to actually get your license as an architecture professional. Class-wise, I had to take, the basic GEs, which I'm sure it's similar to Australia, right?
Wait, what was GEs? What does that stand for?
GEs, general education requirements.
Oh. See, I've never heard of that
those?
before. No.
Whoa, that's wild.
Yeah.
So you have to take general education requirements, writing classes, an art class, which isn't related to architecture.
Yeah.
Really random classes, which has nothing to do with your major. And then major related classes included, the physics, the math component, calculus. And then you had to take 6 studios and your freshman foundational year, which is sketching, drawing. You aren't really in like 3D digital modeling yet, but you're just learning the basic foundations of architecture.
Yeah, I find that interesting. So your bachelor wasn't really related to architecture. It was just a general science degree.
So it has like the science background.
Yeah.
But with an architecture focus.
Okay. Yeah.
Majority of my class, like 80% of my classes were architecture theory, history. The studio classes were the most time consuming.
Yeah.
Structures, construction class, that kind of thing. So those were like 80% of my classes. And then in the States, you can take AP classes. I don't know if you have those.
No.
You? No? Oh,
this is all just brand new to me.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Wow. So, you're honestly blowing my mind.
What's an AP
so
class?
In high school, you can take, it's an advanced placement. That's what it means. AP is advanced placement in high school. So if you intend to study architecture and you're able to take AP physics, you can probably bypass the physics requirement in college and once again, just get that head start at your university. So, yeah.
Man, it's so different. Because over here, it's like I guess you just do high school, and then from high school, pretty much nothing matters until year 12. And then your year 12 grades kind of make up a big final grade. And you can use that grade to get into universities. And it doesn't really like affect what you can study or what you do study in university. It's like completely just irrelevant, really.
Yeah.
So,
wow.
Yeah, interesting.
That's crazy.
You've got Bachelor of Science of Architecture, I guess it would be.
Yes.
And then would there be another path then? I think you were mentioning like you can take a more art kind of side of architecture, or is there just that one bachelor?
It depends on your university. You're going to have 2 options in the States, depending on what architecture program you're applying to. Ideally, you would apply for a Bachelor's of Science of Architecture program that's accredited by the NAAB, but they also offer the Bachelor's of Arts of Architecture. It just depends on the university, honestly. Depending on how competitive or prestigious your first bachelor's degree is, that means you can do your master's degree, your MArch, in more or less time, depending on how good your degree is. Or if you're interested in the educational component of architecture, they would recommend that you attend a highly competitive, prestigious school, like an Ivy League.
Mm.
That's the route I'm going because
Yeah.
I'm interested in teaching eventually. But
Yeah.
yeah, so
That's cool. I just got to confirm, you're moving into your master's then? This next semester? Or when are you going?
We start classes September 1st, and once again, it's at the University of Pennsylvania in Philly. So yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. And do you have,
thank you.
because like in here, or in Australia, I should say, you've got, with your master's, you can kind of take a specific route that you want to go on. So like we could have more of a focus on, say, sustainability, or we could, decide to focus on construction or something like this. Is that kind of the way it is there as well? Could you have a focus on teaching because that's what you want to go down the path with? Or
honestly, if you want to narrow in on something, there's definitely like tack on focuses that you can do for your degree, or you can major in something super specific. I'm still doing the very broad and general degree, but I'm probably going to be focusing on like sustainability research. Not quite sure yet. You can focus any architectural research in grad school onto something that you're really interested in exploring more. So I think that's how we do it here, but not sure.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And I know I'm just throwing some general questions here that you haven't prepared for, so I hope you're doing well.
yeah, all good.
Let's say if you went back to your first year, and you looked over each single semester, could you just run through, say maybe for the first year, what classes you had for semester 1 and semester 2?
Yeah, sure. My first year, actually, I didn't major in architecture. I was initially industrial design major, and I transferred into architecture bypassing the first year. So I can't personally speak to it, but I know typically it's all hand drawings, model making with Bristol. There's a limited number of spots for the architecture admitted majors, which starts second year. So it is slightly competitive, at least at my undergraduate institution. So you're competing against the landscape architects, the architecture students, and there's also the city and regional planning students. So you're all kind of together in one studio. And I think it's a good idea because you can kind of get a feel for the field as a whole, because maybe you intend to become a landscape architect, but because you're learning about architecture, you can actually switch majors again. I think it's just more exploratory for sure. So that was the first year.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. Do you want to run through then the second and third year as well then?
Yeah, sure. So second year was everything. We use a software called Rhino, and that's how we 3D model digitally all of our buildings. So we were introduced to that. You also had to have a firm comprehension of the Adobe Creative Cloud Suite to present your digital drawings. We were being introduced to how to properly draw floor plans, section drawings, elevation drawings. I'm sure you can relate. But we were also doing very poor models, but at the time, you're just amazed with your skills. But looking back, honestly, they were all really bad quality. And then, and then
I can relate to that.
yeah. It's crazy how you can improve though.
Oh yeah.
And then junior year, it's the same thing, 3 projects per semester. And then senior year, you only had 1 project per semester.
Wow.
So that senior year was the most specific design prompt, and it had to be very well thought out, and the models had to be really planned, and and your drawings also had to show that you now know how to properly draw a floor plan, and your renders also had to be pretty nicely done. So
I just want to touch on, because you mentioned that you only use Rhino for modeling buildings. Is that what you meant by that? You only use Rhino?
Rhinoceros, have you used it? Yeah. I think Ohio State chose to use Rhino just because you have honestly like unlimited capabilities with the program. I'm also AutoCAD certified, but I've never used that even in the field. I've never used that in school. And then when I was working at my design firm in Columbus, we used a program called Revit, which I'm sure you also know. So
I think it's super interesting that you only use Rhino, as in like our university really has a focus on integrating different software. So you'll be maybe like starting off with SketchUp, and then you'll do a bit of designing in Rhino, and then you'll move to Revit, and then you'll go to Photoshop and all this kind of stuff. So
yeah, that's weird.
Yeah, I thought that was just super interesting.
I've never used SketchUp, honestly, at university, but we, like I said earlier, if we're doing exterior or interior renders, we always translate the drawing from Rhino to Photoshop or Adobe Illustrator. So those always seemed like the go-to. So.
Oh, that's cool. And would you use a lot of like Grasshopper and stuff then as well, or is it mainly just Rhino?
We touched on Grasshopper a little bit, but it was predominantly Rhino. And then when we went completely digital studio in March, we started using Blender, which is an animation software. Learning that was a little bit tricky, but it's another program. Good to know.
Yeah, sweet. Yeah, you've kind of run through how many projects you have per class, but then it's like, how are they graded? Is it kind of like they're all equally weighted, or are they there's no rubric, so I think honestly you're graded on how well your presentation in front of the jury is, your final presentation, and if the jury brings up really good constructive criticism, or if you have a very poor project and the critique just goes awful, I think that really determines your grade. Throughout my 4 years, I've never received a rubric like you're being graded on this. I think it's what it boils down to essentially is that 10-minute presentation you give with the 20 minutes of feedback. And your studio professor will take notes on how well it's going or how poor it's going, and I think that's how they determine your final grade. So, and then I don't know. No, that's good. So that's so weird not having a rubric, because I need that. I like go through that like it's my Bible. But so how many teachers do you have marking your project then? Is it just the one that you kind of work with throughout the semester and then they give you the grade in the end, or is it spread across different people? Yeah,
well, it depends on the class. For studio, you have your one professor, but when I was in honor studio my senior year, I had two professors actually.
Right.
So I think they kind of talk to each other, trying to determine like the best method for each individual's grade. Other than that, it's just the one person, and that's why you're encouraged to get along with your studio professors. So,
and if you don't, that would be the downfall of your project. So
yeah, for sure. I've known people with really fantastic projects, but they didn't get along with their studio professor. So I wish they would come up with a better way of determining the final grades. But
even just throwing it off to like an external assessor or something like that. Yeah.
Something. Yeah. How do you guys do it?
Yeah. So we usually spend, like, we'll have a class of say 100 students the whole cohort would be in the design studio class, but then that would be broken up into groups of 20, and a group of 20 would have a teacher assigned to that group. So you'd have like 4 tutors, and then you'd have like the one big lecturer who does all the lecture content, and kind of all the tutors go back to that person to see where they're going with their projects and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That sort of makes sense. So yeah, it's like you work with just the one tutor, but then it's like you can move around the class and you can go talk to other tutors, and you've got the lecturer that you can talk to and stuff as well. So a bit different.
Nice.
Yeah. I think it's good that like you have more than one person to talk to, because then it's like as well, when you're getting your work graded, it's not just the one person, and if they don't like you, then you kind of you're screwed. But then it's like, you've got more than one person marking your work, so it's like different points of view, and you can get advice from different people who have different experiences and stuff as well. So
no, that's great. I wish we did that over here.
Yeah, maybe they'll implement that soon.
Maybe. Fingers crossed.
So I want to talk about the actual kind of lesson structure. I always found it weird because I feel like I'm barely at university here in Australia. I feel like I do maybe 90% of my work at home. So I'm curious, in the US, is it like a 9 to 5 structure where you're at uni multiple times a week, or is it, how is it kind of structured in the lessons?
Oh, I live on the architecture. I live in the architecture building. I'm lucky if I get like 3 hours of sleep or something, especially close to a final review. There's this one girl in my grade, and she didn't sleep for 2 weeks.
Wow.
So it's very intense. Yeah, I know. 2 weeks. 2 weeks.
Jesus.
If you're at the very beginning of a project, you have this grace period where you're able to go home, sleep properly, do other things, do your other classwork. If you're towards the tail end of a project, you're living in the architecture building, essentially. At least that's how it was at my school. There's less competitive architecture schools, though, too, that you can apply to and go to. But it's intense.
Yeah. And so is that for like your actual classes, or is that just say you're just working on your project? Like, are you going to have tutors there with you the whole time, or is it?
No.
Yeah.
So for studio, we would meet at OSU. We would meet for 3 times a week from 1:30 to 5:30.
Right.
And if you were in honors studio, you would meet at 12:30 to 5:30. Right. And that's when your professors are there to help you or talk about your project, help you work through it. But once 5:30 rolls around, the building essentially has no professors left because everyone's home. But you're there still working on your project, trying to perfect it. Yeah, it's a lot of trial and error, I would say. Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, it's the same.
Yeah, so. Just experimentation.
Study models.
Yeah. Oh, God.
Oh, God. Yeah.
So as you look back over your past years, what has your work involved? Because for me, first year was very much model making and hand sketching. And then second year, we started to get into a little bit of computer modeling, not too heavy. And then just this third year, that's when it's starting to get computer heavy. And a lot of 3D modeling and stuff. So what's it like over there in the US?
I would say all 4 years you have to do the physical modeling. We're pretty like modeling heavy, I would say. And then the digital models started in Rhino your second year on. Your first year, similar to yours, was hand sketching and drawing a lot, learning like those technical skills. Year 2, 3, and 4, it was predominantly digital work. And then plotting your drawings and pinning up for reviews. That was it. I would say from second year on, it was all digital stuff. It kind of snowballed where you had to keep dedicating more time to working out the building circulation and the details and making sure your renders were better than last project. So it really didn't necessarily stop. It just kind of snowballed where they would expect more details or more drawings or so on and so forth.
What are your teachers like? I hear about a lot of students complaining about their teachers being very toxic or really harsh on them, and they're not really trying to help them progress. They're kind of just being mean. In Australia, it's quite the opposite. Like, I feel like our teachers are really supportive and they help us, I guess, in that way. They're really kind and supportive to help us with our ideas and stuff like that. Is that the same over there in the US, or would it vary, I guess, just from person to person?
It would depend. I would like to say that no teacher here has it out to get you. Yeah. But I will say you will need thick skin. Developing thick skin in critiques and when you're receiving harsh criticism, I think is essential for this major. Yeah. When you're working X amount of hours, not sleeping over this project essentially becomes your baby, and you funneled so much time and energy into it, and for your professor to come in and just completely crap all over it, it's heartbreaking. And I can understand that. So, but I don't think any professor here is out to get a student. I think they are obviously 10 times more experienced than the students are, and they're just trying to push your design thinking, your technical skills. So if you look at it in that light, I think it's easier to take the criticism and learn from it. So, yeah.
Oh, such a good message. I think that's where a lot of students get stuck, though, because they're like, the teacher's out to get me. Like, they don't appreciate anything I do. I put in all this hard work and they just, scrap it and throw it off the table or something like this. But if you just take the criticism and use that to kind of progress your own ideas and stuff, that's what they're there for. They're just trying to progress your ideas and help you get better. I think that's such a good point. Moving on, this might be a bit of a weird topic, and I want to say it anyways. The financials for a student, like how do you finance the fees in uni? Because it's like here, I'm guessing it's a bit different. Like our government gives us they call it a HEX loan. It's it's so weird. It's like it's so easy just to sign up to university and not realize how much debt you're getting into. But it's they just willingly hand out money and give you a loan, and then you pay it off as you're working. So it's not like, well, you start paying it off once you start earning a certain amount. So if you never earn over the threshold, then you never have to pay it off. So
nice. Wow.
Except, then it just means you can't make any money, which is kind of sad, but
that's nice though.
So, what's it like over there? Does the government help out, or the uni? How's that work?
Oh, wow. Okay. I didn't know that either. Do you have to pay it back with interest? You don't have to answer that if you...
No,
okay.
It's not as high as, say, like a mortgage or something, but there's definitely interest on top of it.
Yeah, it's similar in the US. And so they'll offer you government aid, which has a lower interest rate. But 9 times out of 10, the government loan isn't going to be enough for you to cover the educational tuition costs. Right. So you're going to need to get a private student loan, and that's going to be at a higher interest rate. And that is why our student debt is in the trillions, probably more. I mean, it's disgusting, but you're paying it back for years and years with that high interest rate. So it's expensive. And that's why a lot of folks here have decided to do community too, which I think is a really smart financial decision, just because the loans here are ridiculous.
Yeah. So when do you have to pay off that loan then? It's like the same as here where you have to pay it off as you're working and then it kind of just gets taken out of your pay? Or is that something you just pay off on the side, like a credit card or something?
Yeah. You pay it off on the side. And if you don't pay it off, like your life is down the shitter, because you can't do anything with a low credit score, because it will affect your credit score. So you won't be able to buy a house or a car or anything like that when you're older. You will have to pay it off. I think it's 6 months out of college after you graduated.
Wow.
But if you're going to another program, like I'm getting my master's degree, so I am able to extend my grace period because I'm still in school and I don't have a full-time job yet. Yeah, it's really twisted. They're definitely out to get you, but it's unfortunate.
I guess I got to do it somehow.
Yeah.
Let's move on to becoming an architect. What's the pathway like there in the US? How do you become an architect?
So within the United States, we have 55 licensing boards. Essentially, all of them have the same 3 components, even though every state has different variables, but it boils down to 3 things. The first one is your education. So you are going to need a Bachelors of Science, Bachelors of Art in Architecture from an NAAB approved college. And you can choose to get your master's degree, but you don't have to. You can compensate the lack of your master's degree with more work experience hours that you put in. It's probably faster for you to knock out a master's degree, actually, just because they'll have you overcompensate, I think, hour-wise. And then the second component is the actual work experience. You need 3,200 and some hours of experience where you are a legal employee and you have to have X amount of hours in each category. So site visits, construction drawings, all that good stuff. I would look at it like an apprenticeship, just where you're trying to learn the ins and outs of actually working in an architecture firm. And the third would be the exams. And I believe there's 6. Let me see. Yeah, there's 6 divisions in the exams, and you have to pass all of them. Right now, according to the internet, the typical rate of pass fail is about 50%. So some people are going to have to take twice just to pass it. But and then after that, hopefully you got your certification done and going from there.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Yeah. So there's a lot to it. For the working hours, the work experience, can you start logging them, I guess, like while you're still studying? So you're working in a firm. Wait, and you mentioned earlier that you did some practice earlier as well. Did you say, did you count that towards your accreditation, however you say that?
I did. I would recommend for anyone who is planning on becoming a practicing architect to definitely get a job. That way, when you graduate with your master's degree, you aren't spending 2 full years with no license to practice as a professional architect. You're kind of playing catch up. So I would recommend just getting a part-time job, working full-time in the summer. The firm I worked at, it's Design Collective in Columbus, Ohio, and they were so lovely. Like, they taught me so much, and architecture school and practicing architecture are definitely 2 entirely different things. So I would recommend getting an internship.
Yeah, that's awesome. How long did you do it for?
A year.
Wow.
And then Corona hit, so that stopped. I miss them though. I hope they're well.
That sucks. Are they interested in like taking you back up then when COVID's all over, or? Because
they're in Columbus, Ohio, I don't think it's gonna work out. Yeah. But I wish them the best. So
that's good. And how did you find it studying as well as doing work? That wouldn't be easy.
It's definitely a time management game. You have to, I'm sure every architecture student knows this, but time management is the name of the game. And once you master that, I think you can accomplish a lot in the field, but also as a student, just schedule out your time effectively and you'll be okay.
Oh, yeah. So, that's what it's all about.
How long, for sure.
How long did you... Or how many days a week, say, or how many hours did you put into your work when you were doing that and studying?
I worked like 43 hours full time, and then I would work, it would range. So if I'm close to a final review, I would actually take off work for a week. But if there's limited obligation to my actual schoolwork, I'll try and work 25 hours a week. Wow. And if it's like a normal day in the middle of the semester, I typically log 17, so a little bit less, but it gave me enough time to commit to both being a student and aspiring architect practicing. So
I was not expecting that. I was expecting like 10, 15 hours, not full time. What the hell? Okay, that does not sound easy to do. Jesus. No. I mean, I work like a part-time job for 17 and a half hours, and then I think that's too much, like doing 45 hours or something.
There's older individuals studying architecture at OSU, and they had full-time jobs, and I had no idea how they did that, because it's just, I don't know, balancing act for sure, but I don't do that. I try not to do that, you know? No.
That's crazy.
17 hours is a lot.
Yeah, so, I mean, not as much as 40 or whatever, 43.
43.
Jeez. Like my uni course, it's full time, so it's like I still see people doing like full time work as well. So you're doing full time uni and full time work, so you're putting in like 80, 90-hour weeks. I'm like, how do you do that?
Yeah, I mean, not really. It's only if it's slow at school, I would say, is when you can try and work full time. But I'm still an intern, so like you don't get the full-time employee benefits just because I have been so flaky at work. But like, if you can find a nice laid back firm like that who can work with your class schedule, like that's gold. That's like finding gold, especially as an architecture student. So,
very rare to find that though. So at what point can you start working as not necessarily as an architect, but like even just like as an intern or something? I guess where I was going with this question originally was at what point can you start designing buildings, and then like I guess you'd have to be accredited as an architect, but say if you're working under someone who has their license in Australia, you can still design buildings and still, you know, work on projects and stuff like that. How does it work there in the US?
I'm sure it's similar, but my first day as an architectural intern, I was working on buildings and their CDs, the construction drawings in Revit. Oh, yeah. But you can't sign off on a CD set until you have your license. Right. So because you take on the legal responsibilities for it. I mean, architects have been sued in the past just for structural issues for not catching mistakes in the CD set. Obviously, you can't sign off on a whole roll of drawings until you get your certification done. But the whole process of becoming an architect in the United States takes about 8 years, give or take. Oh, wow. Yeah. So yeah, it's definitely a long process.
Wow. All right. I think we've done pretty well to get through all of those questions. Is there anything else that you'd like to add, Natalie, before we finish up?
I would say architecture definitely is a labor of love. And just one thing I learned within this past year is is that studying architecture and practicing architecture are two entirely different things. So if you're really passionate about studying architecture, you might want to explore other ways to utilize your architecture degree, just because practicing architecture is very black and white sometimes at specific firms. It can be discouraging, especially after putting in all the effort and time into studio. But if you can find a way to express your passion for architecture elsewhere, I would recommend doing so. Other than that, try and sleep as much as you can and just keep going, because I think it's worth it. It's a really fun major and you get to meet really cool people. So, yeah.
Oh, well said. And I get, that's what we were talking about earlier as well. Just have a creative outlet that's not architecture, because it can get really boring if you're just doing what do you call them, CDs or CVs?
BDs, construction drawings.
Find something to, like, Natalie's got a YouTube channel. I know a lot of people do their own artwork and stuff like that. So yeah, beautiful advice. All right, Natalie, thank you so much for being on the show. I'm sure a lot of students are going to get a lot of information out of this, and it's really helped me understand what it's like studying in the US as well. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for having me.